Hello everyone, Melanie here with CGL Recruiting. And do you want recruiters and companies to spend more time looking at the data on your resume? Well, I'm going to give you 4 tips how to make that happen. So let's jump right into looking at these 4 ways. The first is, remember, we're talking about looking at the data on your resume, not just the resume itself. And that's going to bring me to the actual physical format of the resume. Now, by now, hopefully you know that your resume has to be in a format that's applicant tracking system, easy to use and upload. And we have another video that covers that. So that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about right now, believe it or not, is the margins on your resume. And let me explain why margins are so incredibly important. So a study was done where a group of recruiters was taken and put looking at the same 2 resumes, and they were given a short amount of time to look at both of them. And what the company did is they shot back a heat-seeking sensor that showed exactly where the recruiter's eyes were hitting the pages and what they were focusing on the different resumes. And when they got all of the data together, they then mapped it onto the resumes to look and see, in the short amount of time they were given, where they spent a lot of time on the resume looking. And they were a little shocked by the results, because a ton of the time on one resume was spent in the area of the margins around the resume. And it was a resume that had a little bit thicker margins. They were about 1 inch on each side. And then the second resume had very small margins. And they noticed there wasn't that much time spent on those small margins. And so the company is like, well, why are they spending all this time in this white space as opposed to looking at the data when we gave them, under a deadline of how much time they had to look at these resumes? And what they found was, this is kind of a marketing 101 thing, in that the eye is naturally drawn to the white space in between text. It gives your eyes a break when there is nothing to look at or to focus on. And so the recruiter's eyes kept getting pulled to these very large margins. Well, recruiters are under the gun, and they are always trying to look at things as quick as they possibly can to move on as they're trying to get through so many resumes. And you don't want that little bit of time that you have with them to be focused in the white space on the margins. You want them to focus in on the data, which is exactly what happened in the second resume in the study that was done. So if your margins on your resume are anything bigger than like the Microsoft Word narrow, take a moment now and reduce those margins down. Bring them to the narrow margins. This is an easy setting if you're using Word. You just go up and change margins to narrow. And for those of you that are wondering, why do we even have such big margins? It's just a holdover from history where books were very valuable, and unfortunately they weren't always climate controlled or kept away from pests like mice and other little things that used to like to chew on the pages. And the text was so valuable on a page, large margins were there so that they could be bound, and so that if anything damaged the edges of the book, it didn't affect the text. Well, that's no longer an issue for us. So take those margins and shrink them down. Let's talk about the second thing that you can do to make recruiters look more at the data on your resume. Now, recruiter fatigue is something that happens quite often, and you see this most times when you have large groups of text. The best way to avoid recruiter fatigue is to utilize bullets. It's very simple to just section your information into bullets that can be easily digestible by the reader. Instead of them seeing this huge paragraph and just trying to scan for a couple words, lead them down your resume by utilizing bullets. If you haven't considered even having a section at the top of your resume with bullets, watch our video on the 2020 resume format, and I'll explain why I definitely recommend you do that as well. The next thing you want to do in order to get recruiters to read more of your resume is to utilize bold. Now, when you're utilizing bold, you can very easily lead the recruiter or hiring manager or anybody looking at your resume down throughout the document. Now, you don't want to bold everything, right? You want to be really strategic about this and bold a word or two here and there on the different bullets that you're doing. I wouldn't bold one on every single bullet, skip a couple in between, and make sure what you're bolding is something that is a key word, not something that is more of a soft competency, but something that you think is very important and will definitely be something that the hiring manager or recruiter is going to look for this position. The more you can utilize bold and lead the recruiter down through the story of who you are, the better chance you have of them spending more time on your information. So the last thing that I'm going to recommend that you can do to help get the recruiter to spend more time on your skills and experience is to utilize sections in your resume. And what I mean by sections is you want an area that has experience. You want an area that has your summary. You want an area that has education. And you should actually utilize words to actually break those different sections. And the reason you're doing this, again, is to try and tell your story. You're trying to engage the recruiter in. Now remember, we have recruiter fatigue that we are always fighting. We're trying to get someone to look more in depth at what you bring to the table. It's not their fault. They're just used to looking at hundreds and hundreds of resumes a day. And so it can be very easy to fall into that glazing over. We want you to be able to draw their attention. And you don't want to do that with things that are too flashy or out there, because then you mess up against all of the applicant tracking systems. You can easily do this by sections. It's going to help a recruiter to bring you from this piece to the next and then to the next. It also helps them because they do think the same way applicant tracking systems do about gates and search filters in their heads. So if they know, oh, I'm looking for this position that has to have a CPA, let me go under their education or certifications. It's easy for them to quickly get to the area that they want to and then get a chance to look at that data in depth, as opposed to just scanning, and not really getting a chance to look more in depth at the information. Their time is limited, and we want to make sure that any time that they spend on you is absorbing the great skills and experience that you have. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, please give me that thumbs up in the end. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.